Seth, what I want to talk about before we get to calls was something that happened recently, and then like my deep dive into it. So you know the band Skillet,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so how do you explain Skillet to people who don't know what Skillet is? Because
All right, well-
Skillet, here's why. Because Skillet is like, that means something. If you're in the Christian music scene, you have an opinion on Skillet, right? Like, they're a big deal. What would you say?
Well, this speaks a little bit to my background. I came out of contemporary Christian music. I was in Christian radio for a dozen years, and we played Skillet on the radio. And it was one of those bands that we really liked because they enjoyed quote unquote secular airplay out there. They were what we called a crossover artist. And what happens is then a band like Skillet or whoever gets play on standard pop rock radio stations that aren't religious stations. It sort of, we felt legitimized, hey, they're playing our music out there, Skillet's going to go change the world. Many of the bands that would do that would water down their lyrics on purpose for that reason. We call them God or girlfriend songs, talk about love and be together forever. And, it could be Jesus or it could be, some girl you were hot for or whatever. And, it's this nebulous strategy of trying to get crossover appeal. And Skillet was successful in that way. And we liked them at the time because they didn't beat you over the head with a freaking baseball bat. It wasn't like, even though their lyrics were about Christianity, they weren't so, I don't know, egregiously zealous and evangelical that it left a bad taste in your mouth, even as a believer. You felt like, well, I could play this for my non-fundy friends and they could probably enjoy it, right? And that has certainly changed. But back then, I'd say they were, I hate to say this because it's so polarizing, but they were kind of Christian music's Creed or Nickelback.
Christian music's Creed.
This
what
kind
a
of
take. But I think you're right.
Packaged rock, catchy, relatively safe, but still kind of, they were our Creed or Nickelback in the Christian faith.
I think you're right. We, in my youth group, we had one night where, I kid you not, we dedicated the entire Bible study time to analyzing Skillet lyrics. Our youth pastor actually endorsed this time. He said, all right, I picked some songs and I want to kind of analyze them with you. And I think one of them was talking about abortion, all these kinds of stuff. So that was, that's a big deal, I guess, what we're trying to say, right? Like, Skillet is a well-known Christian band, even if you're not familiar with them. If you're in the Christian music scene, you've heard of them. They're pretty big. And basically, the lead singer of Skillet has said some things recently about deconstruction, specifically saying it's like the biggest threat to Christianity since, I don't know. He doesn't like it. What did he say specifically, Seth? He said it was the enemy, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to watch the metamorphosis of this band, at least its front man, because they were not a polarized or polarizing band until recently. And John Cooper, lead singer of Skillet, has just got a bug up his ass. I mean, he is freaked out. He's mad about it. He wants to go and pound that drum. And he posted this 1,800 word Facebook post. It's also part of a blog, I think, where he gave two scenarios. And he was talking about deconstruction, but he talked about it with kind of a sneer.
He said it's time to declare war against the deconstruction Christian movement.
And he was going after people like you and like me who are, in our ways, however we can, trying to be a part of the conversation, which encourages people that doubt is okay. Doubt is part of our process, which determines what is true and what is not. And it's okay to ask questions. There are no sacred cows, but in his mind, we're these ministers of the anti-gospel. And he had written this piece essentially to the church saying, we can't allow the soft peddling of Christianity. So not only is he coming after those of us who have deconstructed, deconverted, but he was also challenging his fellow Christians that they need to take a hard line just like he is. They need to go out and froth at the mouth and do battle. I saw someone in the comment section say the question isn't why are we so angry? The question is, are we angry enough?
Yeah.
And I can't tell how much of this is just flop sweat as he sees the increasing secularization of the culture, with 26% of Americans now identifying as religious nuns. And so this is part of that overall cultural Christian freak out as they see their impending obsolescence, at least as a majority. Or if he considers this his mission field, is it a kind of theological masturbation going on where it just makes him feel good to go out and be God's champion? Who knows what motivates him, but he has certainly misrepresented people legitimately trying to examine and, when necessary, deconstruct a bad idea.
Yeah, definitely. Like these comments that he made, really, it's not comments. It's a blog post. It's like a declaration that he made. It really kind of inspired me to kind of look more into what other Christians have been saying about deconstruction, because there's been a lot more writings about the deconstruction movement that's been happening in Christianity, like post 2016, but especially now, as the years have gone by. And so I kind of did a survey. I went through the Christian Today. I went through a bunch of different sources, and everything I saw, Seth, was really fascinating. I saw some people who are really supportive of this and said, yes, this is actually a Christian thing to do, is to talk about your faith and talk about why you believe and stuff. It's like, oh, okay. And then there are some people that said, well, this is the work of the devil trying to trick people into leaving the church, and like everywhere else in between, right? So there's this kind of broad takes here going on. But the thing that I got the most out of it was fear. I would say that is the most overwhelming response. And I think the fear is of people leaving, of thinking, well, I don't know if I want to be a part of this anymore. And suddenly the church loses power in people's lives. And the church in the United States, very different as an entity than it is in other places. The church informs your politics in this country. Like, especially if you're part of the evangelical church, particularly the white evangelical church, like that is, there's not a big separation there, right? One is going to be correlated with the other. And I think that scares people because suddenly this voting bloc doesn't have the same, they're not on the same page anymore. And that's a really interesting thing to see from a sociological perspective, I guess, like the decoupling of that. And people are kind of realizing, hey, these things are really related, right?
John, in his article, used an example of someone influencing, let's call him a seeker, someone in the faith who might be dissatisfied with Christianity. And he used the example of his wife. Oh, my wife's at a restaurant and some guy comes up and hits on her. Hey, you're really hot. What are you doing with that loser? Why don't you come home with me? Right. And then the other person, example B, DMs his wife and says, hey, I just get the idea you might be going through some things. I'm sensitive to where you are. If you ever need to talk, you just let me know. Ooh. And so he frames these two different scenarios, both coming after his wife, making him jealous. And in his words, jealous for all the right reasons. And then he jumps over and says, this is kind of what many of these activists, these deconstructors, these doubters, these agents are doing. And instead, he said, he wasn't as threatened by this person who comes right in your face and like the guy at the restaurant with his wife. He said, it's the person who whispers in your ear, who says they're your friend. What can I do? That's the subversive one. And I think that's a direct reflection of the fear mentality that you're speaking about. The scriptures say the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy.
Right.
And they see the devil under every rock. They see the devil certainly in every doubter. It's either weakness, a challenge to your faith, or a direct attack by Beelzebub himself. And, it's bizarre to me, Dan, to see this supposedly divinely protected and destined culture constantly freaking out about the devil that's supposedly already defeated. The battle is already won. God's master plan will be fulfilled. This also speaks to this idea that we know we're near the end of days.
Right.
And absolutely. Jesus is coming. You can see it in the headlines. The prophecies are fulfilled. It won't be long. It won't be long. Are these people high-fiving and throwing a party about the apocalypse? They should be, because it means they're closer to heaven. But instead, they're just frothing freak out all the time, 24/7. I think that's very telling. Very telling.
Definitely. It's cool to see so many people talking more about their stories and like making this hashtag evangelical thing like keep going. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see more people come out of that. Obviously, we've landed where we are in our community, but it's important to remember that people who are deconstructing aren't necessarily going to come out on the other side as atheists. A lot of them are still coming as either more progressive Christians or maybe go into more spiritual or new age beliefs. And I've seen all of that. It's like a reverse funnel. They're coming from evangelicalism to all these different kinds of beliefs. So there's still stuff that we can deconstruct there too. I mean, for me, I was definitely, I called myself a Christian mystic for a little bit before I really dropped everything, because I thought that my experience with God was the only valid form that my faith could take, because I realized there wasn't any good hard evidence. So I had to go through like my personal experience, right? Which is a hard thing to kind of deconstruct in itself, because you're the only one that knows about that. And then when I started looking into people talking about neuropsychology and how we often attribute faith experiences to experiences that can explain by natural phenomenon, I kind of realized, I think I just had a thing happen to me that other people happen to, because I have a brain and I live in a physical world, and my brain is a physical thing that interacts with the physical world. And so I had this experience. So I think we're going to start to see more people in America come to more, broader, open ideas to different religious ideas. I don't know if we're all going to be atheists, though. I don't know if we're all going to become nuns. I think what we're seeing is kind of a splinter in Reformed beliefs. That's my prediction anyway.
I think, COVID has made it interesting too,
Yeah.
because we see people who had a good excuse not to go to church on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
And for some of these people, they began to step away from that sort of inner circle, and they gained a little bit of oxygen. They gained a different perspective. And some people from that distant vantage began to start asking questions, and maybe they stumbled upon an activist or whatever. So it's been interesting to watch the phenomenon of the pandemic sort of playing. Churches are freaking out because people are leaving and the tithes are being affected, and how influential are they, et cetera. But, you and I agree on this, and I'll say it to people who call my broadcast. If they're on a journey, I'm like, I don't need to tell you where your journey goes. That's not what I want. Sure. That's what we try to escape, where you start with the answer and then go ask questions. I think my big shtick is, you deserve an authentic life. And if somebody says this question is forbidden, that's the first question you should ask, right? There are no sacred cows. And you should be able to discover who you are, what you want, what your values are. You don't have to carry a family mantle, a cultural mantle. You don't have to live, vote, love like somebody else. You don't have to worship like anybody else. Who are you and why? And if somebody arrives at a destination that is not the one that I did, okay, we may be able to have that discussion. But most important, I think, is people giving themselves permission to live an authentic life.
Absolutely.
And that's a gift. It's a gift that you can give to yourself every single day,
Yes, I think that is one of the greatest things I have now that I don't consider myself part of the Christian culture, is I have the freedom to define who I am and what my values are and what I really believe in. And when I say really believe in, I'm not talking about the supernatural, but like my values and principles, you know what I mean? Like that can now be at the forefront, because I don't have a book getting in the way of what I think is right or what somebody else thinks is right. It's a little more.
Dan, you just want to sin.
That's what it is.
You just want to sin.
Seth, got me, dude.
That's what the apologist Frank Turek keeps saying on
Seth.
Twitter. All right. Have you seen it? He keeps coming forward and he essentially says, I've never met anybody who's deconstructed. And he uses that word. Who didn't
want to sin? Yeah.
Who didn't want to act in an aberrant way sexually was what he was trying to say.
Yeah. I've seen that too. I can't believe you call me out like that on stream, dude. That's not cool.
No,
on my
it
show,
wasn't
but-
that we looked at, the story of a cosmic wizard and a dirt man and a rib woman in an enchanted garden with talking snakes and a 500-year-old ship captain, and there were penguins and camels and a large boat that floated with a flood that left no geological evidence and blood magic, and a super baby born because the Holy Ghost impregnated an unwed teenager 1400 years before the printing press could do. No, it wasn't any of that stuff. We just want to go out and get laid.
We just want to get laid.
Thanks, Frank Turek.
That's
Appreciate
it. Insightful insights. Insightful insights.
Sorry about that. I went off on a tangent.
Yeah, you're absolutely you're on point there, Seth. I agree with you. Not adding much to the discourse,